Hey, Cowboy Hickok 45 here today, sporting two of the most common pistols, revolvers of the 19th century. Smith & Wesson Model 3 and its variations, and the Colt single action and its variations. Okay, there were others. These were two of the most common and most popular. Let's shoot them and let's talk about them a little bit, okay? Let's get some ears on, pull out the Colt and shoot. Quick. All right, let's reload this baby. See if I can find some ammo. Yeah, it's in my cartridge belt. Just like a real cowboy. Got ammo right there, handy. Load him up, shoot him again. That's a bad hombre. All right, Smith & Wesson Model 3. Click. Let's reload this baby. See if I can find some ammo. Oh yeah. I bet I have more back there. Yes. All right. Oh, I forgot about those guys. Ah, don't you fall on me. Shoots a little high. Okay, let's put them away. Yeah, Hickok 45. Playing with a couple of the most common revolvers of the 1870s, 1880s, and then even after that, right? The Smith & Wesson, of course this is a Uberti, Taylor's Uberti reproduction of it, but this is a Model 3, new Model 3, and like the Schofield, like the original Model 3 in a sense. It's a top break. It's a top break. And then we have the Colt Single Action Army. Again, called the Army because the Army, it was built for them. They adopted it. And so Single Action Army. And there's that baby. So different barrel lengths. For the most part, that was the biggest difference between these. You could switch out the grips, of course, if you wanted to, and have wooden grips and pearl grips and stag grips, whatever you wanted. Same for the Smith & Wessons. Okay, so there were other guns, Merwin and Holbert. There were, you know, the Remingtons. There were other firearms in the 19th century, but these were probably the most common. Well, I know the Colt was the most common. And I think the Smith was probably the second most common and most in use. Somewhere. A lot of them in Russia, as we discussed already for the Russian model. So, which would I have carried? Which would you have carried if you had been, say, 20 years old, 30 years old in 1875? 1870, 1885, I don't know. If you had been hanging out in Tombstone, or Pennsylvania, or New York. You know, these are not just Western guns, these are the guns, just like today. A Glock 19 is not just a New York or a Tennessee or a Kentucky pistol, is it? So this was state of the art in the entire country, maybe the entire world, the planet, right? So we sometimes think of these as being Western, you know, firearms, but they were just the firearms of the day. Okay, the Colt. Let's, yeah, which would we prefer? You know, some folks, of course, preferred the Colt. Some preferred the Smith & Wesson. I would say we're probably safe in saying that more people carried the Colt. Part of that might have been availability, pricing too. I think the Smith was a little more expensive. It's a little more involved. It's as I have pointed out already, it's an interesting firearm, and it's quite an engineering feat in a lot of ways. You know, the way it works, the top break and everything. And hopefully you've seen me shoot that in on another occasion and explain it more in depth. But it's a very interesting piece of equipment. There's no doubt about that. The obvious difference is that I know even someone brand new to firearms and brand new to these firearms notices, is the ease with which the Smith & Wesson loads and unloads, right? You are empty, you just put it on half cock, lift up, and all the cases fly out, and you pop more in. And I was able, if you notice, to put 2 in at a time too. So you can load it faster and you're back in action. All right? Very handy for those combat situations that all of us are involved in on a daily basis, right? And with the Colt single action, you have to go to half cock, put 1 in, skip the chamber. Well, you can put 6 in if you want, if you're in the middle of the battle maybe, but generally you put in 5, and we'll hammer back. Okay, you're ready to go. You got 5 rounds. And then when you're empty, go to half cock. Now I'm not empty. You just use your ejection system there and pop them out, pop out the empties, right? So it's a different loading and unloading system, a little faster on the Smith & Wesson. Although once you develop a skill, you've done it a while, the Colt is not that bad. You open it up, half cock, and you go through the process and you don't struggle with it. You'll see them struggle in the Westerns, of course, and you may see someone who's new to these struggle a lot, but it doesn't have to be a struggle. It can be unloaded and reloaded fairly smoothly, okay? And then, but that is a difference. That's one of the big differences between these two. And I think that was one of the attractions. If you were, again, trying to decide which pistol to carry, which one to purchase, and you could afford either one in 1880, you know, that would be inviting, wouldn't it? Be able to break that thing open and pop those rounds in that quickly. That is one of the biggest pluses in favor of the Smith & Wesson Model 3. It just is. And again, you know, you had the original Model 3, the American, you had the Russian model, you had the Schofield, and this is a new Model 3 Frontier. So they're all the same basic, you know, top break revolver, load, extract, pretty much the same way. Schofield's a little different. The grip angle is a little different on some of them. The Schofield doesn't have the hump there, but basically the same revolver. Which brings us to the ergonomics of the firearms. It'd be hard to find someone who would argue with the fact that this firearm is one of the most ergonomic, the most pointable firearms on the planet. The Colt Single Action Army. When you pick it up, you know, it's just a natural. The thumb, you don't have to have a long thumb like me or long hands, big hands. It's just very convenient to pick up, cock, and fire. It's very pointable. It's just a natural. You feel as though you can't miss with it. You know, even point shooting, it just feels great. Hard to find a handgun that feels better in the hand, that's more shootable, more pointable, whatever term you want to use, than the Colt Single Action. And then when you get right down to it, that's pretty important. Being able to shoot it well, even though it's slower, right? This gun, now this new Model 3 I think feels better than the Schofield, but these do feel different. They're a little more awkward feeling. Part of that's because, yeah, I'm comparing with the standard, the Colt Single Action. If you had grown up with one of these and you had never felt the Colt, you might think this feels great and feels better than the Colt. Don't know. But it doesn't feel bad at all. It's a little bit better than the Schofield and also better than the Russian model. With the Russian model, they had a really pronounced hump there. So these, the grip on these Smith & Wessons went through some different stages, but it doesn't feel bad. Not bad at all. I could live with this firearm right here. Not a big problem. It's probably a little more complex, maybe a little more fragile. I have read that this is one, I don't know, people can argue that fact, but that the Smith & Wesson might have been a little bit more difficult to get back in action if you're out in the real wilds of the country in the 1880s, 1870s, and it broke on you, extractor system or whatever it might have been, that the Colt was easier to get back into action. Maybe partly because so many people were more familiar with it, and you'd have spare trigger springs and things around and a file, and you could, you know, get it back going. But little more complex. A few more things could go wrong with this. So that would be maybe one negative, but that's also what makes it so interesting, and it's also what makes it faster to load and unload. You know, so you got that going. Now, one other point of comparison too is that the Schofield, the Model 3s, they were loaded for lighter cartridges. Now, nothing to sneeze at. You know, the 44 American, the 44 Russian, the 45 Schofield. You know, they're all healthy cartridges. Nobody makes fun of the 45 ACP. You know, and then you're talking similar ballistics. 44 Special, 45 Schofield probably was hotter with the full black powder charge behind it than a modern 45 ACP. I'm not sure, but you know, pretty healthy round there. But it would not chamber the 45 Colt, long Colt. Now this one does, it's a modern reproduction, but the old ones would not. So you had the 45 Colt cartridge in these babies, and that could be considered a plus because that is one powerful round. Now I load these a moderate amount because I shoot them in all my Colts except the first generation Colts. And if I want a warmer round, I load black powder. The black powder original 45 Colt loads are really stout. I have loaded some of those. I have some that are a full case of black powder behind a 250 grain slug. And I mean to tell you, it is a handful. That was really the magnum of the day, maybe the first magnum. You touch one of those off in a 5.5 inch barrel out here, and it stings. Okay, so for those of you who might think 45 Colt is a weak sister, it is not. That is a powerful round. I mean, it's got some, that's one reason they backed it down for the military to I think 30 grains of black powder. And then they also, I think they got to where they just issued the 45 Schofield round, because that's like a 45 Special, you know, it would fit in the 45 Colt. Not quite as powerful, and you could handle it easier, you know, because everybody's not a avid shooter, and you got a lot of people you have to train. Let's take a couple of shots here before I go away. This is, again, the Colt. You notice how it loads. I want to skip one, put another one in. This is your first exposure to the old Colt single action. Cock the hammer, it's down on an empty chamber, and you're ready to go. Click. Empty the rounds. Empty, ready to load again. Not so hard. Now if you're on horseback, yes, maybe. Let's load the Schofield back up. Not Schofield, but the Model 3. Let's put 5 in here. And with the hammer down on an empty chamber, 5 rounds. Ready to go. Oh, we forgot. We have a 2-liter. Thank you. Wow. Now I'm soaked. You know what? I'm going on the attack. There's a couple of them down here that need to be hit. Ah, where'd I hit? That's bad. Okay. Sometimes when you're close, it's harder to hit than when you're farther away. And then again, to unload, boom, there you go. So, as you can see, if you're going to be missing at 5 yards, you want to be able to reload it fast, right? So let's go back up and take a quick last look at these two fine revolvers. Again, you just see the advantage there in the number 3, being able to unload it fast and reload it pretty quickly. In fact, you know what? There's a guy down there. I'm going to finish off before we finish up here. But that's one of the big advantages of the Model 3, and it's the most obvious difference. And before we go down there and finish that guy off, this one's unloaded. You know, those are the two classics. Again, there's others, the Remington and others, but in terms of what most people carried, this would be it. And also the two most dramatically different designs. You know, they represent the two huge genres of the 19th century and beyond that. Okay, so let's go down here and finish this guy off. I just don't like that. You notice I did a little bit better job of taking my time and hitting it. Now let's just empty it over there somewhere. Alright. See if I can get one on the gong. Here, I know it shoots high. But I saw that. Quick. Okay. So we're out of ammo. I'll come back and get those cases. So again, that's the big difference. Two very, very popular revolvers. And come on out of there, buddy. There we go. Two very popular revolvers, and both a lot of fun, and a lot to be said on the positive end for both of them. You would be in pretty good shape with either one. A lot of people were, a lot of big name outlaws and lawmen both carried this, the Top Break Model 3 of some variation, as well as the Colt, as we all know, right? And they all work pretty well. So, pretty cool. Two great revolvers. Do I have to tell you, life is good